overcome. Yes, we can.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
What the f*** is wrong with you?
Welcome to With Franklin. I'm your host, Chip Franklin. Appreciate you being here, and remind you, please subscribe. You can find us all over the world, but right now we're right here. I really appreciate it. A lot going on this morning. If you saw the market yesterday, it was up. Inflation fears and worries. Powell's announcement seeming to calm a lot of fear. Also, the gas price is starting to come down, and you just wonder what the Republicans will have to say next. It's going to be interesting moving forward. One of the things that they have been quite critical of is Biden's involvement in assisting Ukrainians against Putin and this obscene attack on not just their lives, but on NATO and the free world. It has a history, and it goes back. And boy, I can't think of a better person to talk to about it than Malcolm Nance. Malcolm is not only an author and an analyst and a spy, a former spy. He's also a soldier, and showed what it's like to be a man by heading over there to help our allies. And he's back here safely, I hope. Right, Malcolm?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah.
For now.
So tell me a little bit about that experience in Ukraine. So people that don't know, you your background through naval intelligence, I mean, you're a soldier, and you decided to go over there. I talked a couple times to Brian Karam as well, a journalist, and he was pretty impressed as well. I know that's not what this is all about, you, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? This is something most Americans don't really understand. I mean, this is not Vietnam, where there was a quagmire, people trying to understand what the objective was. This is pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah, it's black and white. We have a foreign power, a totalitarian dictatorship run by a former KGB officer that suddenly woke up. It wasn't suddenly, it turns out. This plan has been in the operation since 2008, and decided he would seize all of Ukraine and turn 25% of the world's wheat production into its own personal province of Russia. He was also intending to eliminate all of the political leadership. There's a report out that came now from RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute in England, based on captured documents, that they fully intended to execute the entire political class and intellectual class of Ukraine. That is their documents that state this. So Putin was going back to an old Stalin-style invasion and dictatorship. And the main reason that he did it had nothing to do with NATO being on his borders. He already has NATO on his borders. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland. They're all on his borders. Now he has Finland to deal with. But as NATO nations being there, that wasn't the issue. The real issue was he was terrified of a Western liberal democracy on his borders. And he decided he was going to carry it out by force and eliminate that democracy, the people and their culture.
So let's forget about idiots like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who criticized this, and speak more to people like Tucker Carlson, who has 40 million people listening to him each week, or more than that. And his support for Putin, his tacit support by criticizing our involvement. Obviously, Putin did not expect the resistance that he did. The people of Ukraine are resilient, to say the least. But there was also support from just essentially everybody in the free world, with maybe 4 or 5 countries outstanding. Even Xi, who seemed the president of China, who seemed like they might be willing to help Russia, seems to have backed off that now. How deep in a corner is Putin and the military?
Oh, he's very deeply in a corner. And, you mentioned a little earlier about, my background in intelligence. And, there's a special relationship that I have with information when in terms of collecting it. I am a street level intelligence collector. All right. I'm the guy that goes and gets the information. So when I went to Ukraine, it was for that very purpose. I went there a month before the war to see how would Russia invade? What lines of communication would they have to cut? What highways would they have to take? How many gas stations are there? How many of those gas stations have liquor stores in them? All of the factors that would go into determining whether Russia was going to be a success or a failure. I was one of the few political analysts in the United States when I was on MSNBC. I'm no longer with MSNBC. And at the time I said, they're never taking this country, and they are definitely never taking the city of Kyiv. There's a factor that news media is not reporting on. And that factor was the Ukrainian army. And in fact, I had gone down to Donetsk with the Ukrainian army to their joint task force and seen them on the line of confrontation. There was just not going to be any way that Ukraine would just collapse and give Russia that country. And so it was very important for me to see that. And it was very clear that Ukraine could not only prevail in this war, stop the Russians from meeting their objectives, but could do what they're doing right now. They are winning the war. So to answer your question, Putin is in a very tight corner. His army is on the verge of collapse. When I spoke at Davos via teleconference last June as a member of the International Legion, representing the International Legion, I had made the prediction that Russian combat power would collapse by September of this year. That meant Russia would have no ability to carry out any offensive operations aside from the most local tactical ones, like they're carrying out in Bakhmut right now. And that has happened. The entirety of an entire Russian army corps collapsed in the northeast in Kharkiv, an offensive operation that I took part in. So I can make that same prediction now. The Russian army by next summer is going to be on the verge of complete and utter rout.
Got a couple questions for you along those lines. First of all, were you at all surprised? I mean, regular citizens took arms to fight against a trained army of a first world army, right? Although apparently not quite as first world as previously thought. Were you surprised by the, and I'm not going to say ease, but by their efficiency and their heart? And when you were over there, and we saw this damage and this destruction of bombing hospitals and maternity centers and women and children. Were you surprised at their resiliency? And last question on that line, I find it slightly ironic because we didn't know that much about Zelensky back, when Trump wanted him to do the favor and investigate, Biden. Were you surprised at this guy's spit? Because I got to tell you, I'm really surprised at this young man and what he's doing.
I got to tell you, when I saw the statement right after the beginning of the invasion, I knew he wasn't going to leave the country. He was just that kind of guy.
What was that famous thing he said? I don't need.
That's the statement.
Yeah.
I don't need a ride. I need weapons.
Gives me goosebumps, man. Really does.
My first thought, I was actually in Dublin. I had left Ukraine that night. The night of the invasion. It was a complete fluke. I had COVID. I couldn't get on an airplane. And that was the night that they put me on an airplane. I thought the invasion would have occurred 5 days earlier. Turns out it was delayed because of a U.S. intelligence leak, and the Russians delayed their operations. But as soon as I heard Zelensky said that, I said, fight's on. This guy is never quitting. He had 36 attempts to kill him. They had special operations forces. They had been capturing left and right cruise missiles targeting him. This man isn't going down. And he walks the streets. He comes out every day. He is a real Ukrainian. And that goes to the question of what Ukrainian spirit is all about. That old joke about fight like a Ukrainian. I have T-shirts that say this. Now I have one that I wore when I was with the Ukrainian army. It's very clear. When the invasion started, I just saw this change in how people looked at Russia, looked at themselves. And we have this joke that, the Ukrainians fight like Cossacks, right? That means they twirl their mustache, swirl their sword, and go charging headlong into battle. And they did that in some areas, and they did take some casualties because of that attitude. Right now, they're fighting like NATO. They are thinking smart. The average citizen soldier or the recalled reservist who is there, they are not there to die. They are there, as the old saying goes, they are fighting to protect the people behind them that they love, not the people in front of them that they hate. But when they get those people in front of them that they hate, they are, let's just say they're merciless until it's time to show mercy. They have compassion as an army. They are really like a Western army. They are
when I
like that Soviet model that you
when
saw.
I think of that, when I think of our military, and I think of what the Republican Party and Trump in particular, this is Cruz speaking recently about Biden and his lack of support for our military. Of course, our military and police were protecting our capital on January the 6th, 2021. But I just threw a graphic in here so people can remember that.
There's no responsibility Congress has that is more important than standing up to the fighting men and women of our military. What Joe Biden and this administration are doing to our military is wrong. It is immoral.
Of course, yeah, we remember.
What are you talking about?
Remember when Kelly heard, because he lost a son in battle, I believe in Afghanistan, and I remember when Kelly heard about this and heard Trump say this. I can only imagine what he was thinking, and others, that, you know, to hear the Republican Party, the party that used to be pro-military, anti-Russia, you know, to see them not support this and to play Trumpian politics. I want to jump subjects though, although I got to ask you one other question. That's a rabbit hole question. Oh. Did Putin really believe that his nukes would deter NATO and the rest of the world from helping Ukraine?
Yeah, according to this study by the RUSI in London, like I said, it was based on captured documents. We've captured a lot of documents.
Yeah.
I personally captured wheelbarrows full of stuff that we couldn't, you know, we couldn't even find any use for, from tactical level.
Let me jump in there real quick. We also got a lot of documents too when the former president Zanovich, I always screw up his name, had to flee, and he fled to Putin. Remember the guy that Manafort was working for?
Yanukovych.
Yeah, Yanukovych. Thank you. And we found a lot of documents then too about money and involvement that had gone, you know, through Manafort, and this whole opening of this trove of communication. And you said earlier about a leak. How secure is our plans and what we plan to do from Russia now that Trump's out of power? Or does he still have documents at Mar-a-Lago that could compromise?
Well, I think that the things that Trump would take, you know, we build in, how can I put it? We know that some information will get out. The biggest secrets, the secrets of the secrets, excuse me, that is me having an allergic reaction to my top secret SCI security clearance that I had for almost 30 years, right? When I just start playing around and I get the sniffles. That's how
you had. By the way, you had more security clearance than Jared Kushner did when he was doing an arms deal with Saudi Arabia.
I did. In fact, I did. And Seb Gorka and 37 other people who couldn't get security clearances that Donald Trump pointed to and said, give them security clearances.
Gorka? I didn't know he got a security clearance. That guy did?
He did for a short while, and then they kicked him out of the White House because the FBI wouldn't clear him. But again, you know, I held my clearance honorably. I lived in mortal terror of not losing one document, just inadvertently, casually talking about what was in one document.
Yeah.
So our information is secure because the American system is based on trust. Donald Trump betrayed that trust, and I hope he'll go to prison for it. But Russia's, good God, we had a copy of the entire invasion plan. The New York Times reported that in January. And I knew that and had reported that on television, that it appeared we had very, very deep planning documents, if not the actual invasion plan.
If you guys don't know who I'm talking to, this is Malcolm Nance. His latest book, They Want to Kill Americans, critically acclaimed and horrifying in the same run. We'll talk about that in just a second. Got back from, how long were you in Ukraine fighting?
I was fighting for 8 months, and I was in Ukraine almost 10 months. I
mean, you know, we're not that far apart in age. And I just, you know, I got to tell you, I don't know how you did it. I really don't know. I mean,
oldest man in the Legion, 61 years old in combat.
Wow. Good for you. And thank you. All right, let's talk about the irony of the title of your book. Most people would think we're talking about foreign adversaries, but They Want to Kill Americans. You're not talking about them. You're talking about right here. Since the last time we spoke, and it's been a while, has it gotten better? These Oath Keepers, these Proud Boys, these other groups that are, I mean, you know, Nick Fuentes was meeting at Mar-a-Lago and saying anti-Semitic, and racist stuff. saying that blacks should get used to drinking from their own water fountains, that kind of crap. Is it getting worse? Where is it right now since the last time we spoke in almost a year? Really?
Yeah. Well, I think the last time we spoke was in July when I did the book launch.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah.
But I got to tell you, it's gotten worse. It's gotten a lot worse. I started the outline of this book in August 2020. By September 2020, it was pretty clear that this thing was going to go to what I called an insurgency, which is a series of political insurrections and actions, both political and paramilitary, which would lead to a long-term chaos campaign, trying to destabilize the United States government. We are in the political component of that campaign right now. So yes, when I published the book just this last July, it took about a year to get it to print. It had gotten much worse. I had predicted it would take 6 months for the Republican Party to be consumed by QAnon ideology. I said I predicted a year. It took 6 months. By July of 2021, it was pretty clear the attempt to overthrow the Capitol, led by QAnon people, and a conspiracy, a cabal that I had written about of the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys that were working together in concert to overthrow the government and give Donald Trump a dictatorship. Yeah. It has only gotten much worse since this time. The last 4 months since I came off the book tour, I've just seen an acceleration in the way that people are viewing us heading towards civil war. They're using the phrase with great commonality on the side of the Republicans.
Well, you look at Carrie Lake, who has called for violence to overturn results in Arizona. She literally said, you have to approach this like a violent revolution. Mm-hmm. How do you not get arrested for saying that? I don't understand.
Oh, because I defended your right to say stupid, violent things as free speech for my entire career in the armed forces of the United States.
But inciting someone to commit a violent act is different. That's fire in a theater, right? I mean,
it is fire in a theater, but I think she walked a fine edge. I think she may have tiptoed over it, but it's not like she's, we've seen people come out. The famous quote up in Washington State. The gentleman says, when can we use our guns? When can we start killing liberals? When can we start killing them? That is when you are looking at not a canary in the coal mine, right? You're looking at a coal mine collapse. And what we are seeing right now here in the United States is people walking around with matches in the coal mine, all right, knowing it's full of gas. And they want this explosion. And, ironically, when I made my book tour talking about they want to kill Americans, the right wing pulled this insane gaslighting trick where they actually wrote articles saying Malcolm Nance calls for violence against conservatives in the United States. And I thought, this is what it must have been like to be Jewish in Nuremberg in 1936, right? To be blamed for everything when clearly these are the people who are out in the streets beating other people. Look, the price of AK-47 and AR-15 ammunition has dipped a little bit since the insurrection in January 6th, but that doesn't mean that they're not stockpiling.
Yeah, a lot of comments here, and I appreciate it. And we do read all these if I don't get them all up there. We are in a political civil war. I think you can throw the political out, really, because there's actually people on the street getting hurt. I think one of the things when I hear this Fuentes thing really bothered me on a lot of different levels because the Republican Party didn't come out strong enough. They kind of tacitly, McConnell kind of whispered something, but I mean, this is the kind of thing you need to be standing up on a table, screaming at the top of your lungs, what happened to our country? Here's another one. This is an interesting comment. Do you think that the Republicans when they take over the House, will have enough votes to stop supporting Ukraine? Well, they can interfere with legislation, but do you think there's enough Republicans in there that will vote party line to stop that?
I don't think so. I think right now, the hardcore that, a block of 36 pro-Trump people who are also pro-Moscow. I have some communications policy here that we can give to my Democratic colleagues and friends. Call them out as traitors. Just say you're betraying everything that America has ever stood for. You're backing a KGB officer. You are a KGB lover. You are the literal ex-commie lover. The man was a communist until his mid-40s.
Well, you look at the House right now. Look at the possibilities for the two. Obviously, it's going to be a Republican speaker. but compare
Maybe.
McCarthy. Maybe, yeah, I know. I mean, the Arizona thing is kind of funny because if they by not okaying the election votes, right, they may lose a House seat, but it's still a long shot. But this is McCarthy talking on January the 6th and blaming Democrats for not being prepared for the idiots that Trump sent up. Listen to this. This is unreal.
I'm Brittany Lewis with.
God, I don't have the right one. Here it is. Here it. Let me play Hakeem Jeffries. So you got we all know McCarthy, and I apologize, I don't have that piece there. But McCarthy said, "Why weren't the National Guard there?" When, of course, you're talking about the president of the United States, right? You know, the governor in Washington, D.C., who calls in the National Guard? It's federal property. It's not Larry Hogan in Maryland. Larry Hogan said he had the National Guard. I hate to take people back through all this, but Larry Hogan said, I was waiting. I was calling, and Espers was no longer there. Who followed Espers? I'm sorry, the guy that they replaced and Secretary of Defense. Anyway, but he was calling, trying to get permission to send the National Guard in. And then there were some people who were worried about if we sent the National Guard in, Trump would turn them on the actual House and try to take over the House. There was a real fear. There was a real fear Pence had not to get in one of these Secret Service cars because he didn't know the people in it. I mean, this has been passed down. It's not just, testimony before January 6th talking about Trump trying to take the steering wheel, which has now been 7 people have said that they've either seen that or heard firsthand of it happening from different sources. But I mean, when I think of this and I think about what went wrong, and I look at somebody like Hakeem Jeffries, just listen to this, because this is, to me, what an American is all about right here.
I was born at Brooklyn Hospital, raised in Crown Heights by my 2 parents who were public employees, a caseworker and a social worker in a middle class, working class neighborhood in the midst of the crack cocaine epidemic in the 80s into the early 90s. I'm thankful for them, thankful for their love, support, and prayers throughout the years, throughout my journey into it.
He goes on to talk about having grown up in that environment. And I, by the way, his cadence is so Obama-ish. I love it. I was actually speaking at somebody asked me to do an officiate at a wedding, and he knows I talk fast. And he said, think Obama when you talk and make your cadence like the former president. And I did it. And I'm telling you, Malcolm, it was perfect. It was such a great lesson this guy told me. But Jeffries, to me, and forget that he's black. Just listen to that story I try to tell people. And that's the quintessential American story. The Americans in your book that you say they want to kill are people who are honest and decent people that want opportunity for everybody. And they're willing, in my opinion, to listen to both sides. I have Joe Walsh on all the time. Joe did some horrible things in his past that he regrets. He called Obama to regret calling him a Muslim years later. Obama took his call. I mean, that says a little bit about both of them there in essence. We've all done stupid things, but this is a pivotal moment. Your book is everybody should read it simply for the observations of somebody that's been nose deep in this stuff his whole life. But it's also, I find you can't change things till you know the full truth. And right. The truth is hard and ugly right now, but that's what we have to do. We have to acknowledge it.
Yeah, we absolutely have to do. And this is why I wrote the book. The book is a warning, funny story. My publisher, this book came out in the middle of the light summer reading season, right? The first week of the 12th of July. And I said, oh my God, it's going to be a disaster. Still managed to make number 6 on the Times bestsellers list. And my poor publisher was like, oh, well, it's a hard time for books. And I'm sorry that I actually had to say this. There will come a day where there will be an incident in which every person in this country is going to reach for that book. And unfortunately, it will be ISIS or Al-Qaeda-like attack on American citizens in the United States, which will result in mass casualties, horrific casualties. And the perpetrators will be an American terrorist group who are part of what I call the Titus, the Trump insurgency in the United States.
Well, I mean, I was on the air the night that Timothy McVeigh bombed the Oklahoma City Federal Murray building, and and I remember Jim Bohannon, who came on after me, saying that it was Middle East terrorists and that we should nuke them and all, um, and of course that was the first thought, that Americans could never do this to Americans, but we have a history of this, you know. But today we just have the ability, because of social communication, to organize and access to weapons that, you know, I mean, I don't know how much nuclear material is missing in this country, but it's quite a bit. And if it should get in the hands of people, I have no doubt Oath Keepers or Proud Boys would use it against their perceived enemies in this country.
Well, I'm just happy the fact that now that we have seditious conspiracy convictions and many other convictions of members of the Oath Keeper, and they will keep coming. Same with the Proud Boys. We're expected to get those convictions this week or next week, that we can start calling these people for what they are. They were an organized insurgent group. They were seditionist, and they were essentially American terrorists. Yeah. And that anyone that still believes in the Oath Keepers, who is a former member of the armed forces of the United States or law enforcement, I consider you no better than ISIS or Al Qaeda.
Well, I mean, in some ways, I consider them worse, because ISIS and Al Qaeda, you can make a case and say that our presence there fueled that. You know, I mean, our relationship with the Saudis is what sent bin Laden to Afghanistan to plot an attack against the United States. I'm not saying it's our fault that the towers were bombed and the Pentagon was hit, but if you follow it back and see that our support, our continued support, I mean, and in the Biden administration looking for amnesty for MSB for the Khashoggi murder, right? Because we want gas to keep coming out. I'm not reading Biden's mind. I don't know what else is behind that, but I do know that, you know, this is a country that does not have our interest at heart. You know, as we all know, it's 15 of the 9/11 hijackers came from
17.
Was it 17? Yeah. But you know, the next book, right? As you're planning it now, I mean, I look at this country after Trump. I don't think Trump is going to. I think he's going to run. I don't think he'll be elected. But we do know that the Beauperts and the Greens and the people that think like that, you know, I mean, people like Hawley and the others, and the Senate are cowards, obviously. I mean, I love that photograph of him running out, you know, like a 12-year-old. But underneath it, there's a cancer. And that's what that's what they want to kill Americans about. It's not really about names. It's about a disease, right?
Absolutely. You're absolutely. And right now that disease, Donald Trump is just the name of the disease, right? I mean, for a very long time, no one knew what to call cancer. But Donald Trump is definitely the name on that disease. But that disease is that there is a feeling of such superiority in the United States, white superiority, white supremacy, that the very concept that they were held to account to be decent to their fellow Americans is abhorrent to them.
Yeah.
I've said this before. People go, well, they don't, all these Trump guys, you know, all the Trump voters, they don't really mean that. No, you voted for it. You operatively chose it, knowing that it meant indecency, knowing that it meant incivility, knowing that it meant you supported people who threatened to harm other American citizens, even though some of those people were law enforcement officers, members of the armed forces. You don't care. You sort of remind me of, you know, Timothy McVeigh, when he blew up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, did it because he had read a book called The Turner Diaries.
Right.
And what was supposed to happen that day as the kickoff for a white race war was him blowing up a federal building. He thought that every member of the armed forces would take their guns and start killing black soldiers, and that white cops would start killing black policemen, and that there would be a violent uprising to take over the United States by white supremacists. He actually thought that's what would happen.
And for the record, there were 24 children in that building. And
absolutely. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, which is not that different than what Putin does. And the fact that, you know, the Trump still refers to Putin as a genius and a brilliant man, and you know, his tactics are laudable and that. You know, I don't know what's going to happen with Putin. I would assume it would be a bullet in the head or something, but I'm not sure the next person after him is not even worse. So Anyway,
All I know is they need to get out of Ukraine because they're going to get beaten, they're going to get broke, and their army will probably go home with their weapons.
well, please be safe, my friend, because you don't seem to have, you have 0 to 60 in your whole life. So it's always good to see you. And it's a great book. You can get it on Amazon. Send it to somebody. It's an odd sort of Christmas present, but it's a good eye opener, and it is a great read. And again, they want to kill Americans. Again, Malcolm Nance, thank you so much. Check him out on Twitter or wherever your social media is. And we'll talk again soon, buddy. Okay.
All right. Take care, Chip.
Thanks, buddy. Again, that's a freaking hero right there. 61-year-old man going to another country to fight. I mean, they're essentially us in 1776 to a certain extent. And Putin is King George. I'm not kidding. I'd see, actually, if you recall, there were a lot of American colonists murdered by the British. That's a whole nother story, though. Anyway, so there's a couple of things I want to get to, and a little bit later on in the show. It runs up until 10. By the way, thank you so much for being here. And I want to remind you that this is all sponsored by Moskowitz LLP, tax attorneys, LLP.com, MoskowitzLLP.com, 888 tax deal. If you ever have, I mean, I've worked with them and they've helped me out in a million reasons. That's the reason why they're the only sponsor on the show, is because I know Steve and his firm, and I know the work they do. And I'm not supposed to say this stuff, but he's one of the most benevolent, charitable people I know as well. It's a great firm. If you have any kind of questions, or just an individual, and maybe you haven't filed in a few years, they're the people to go to. Again, MoskowitzLLP.com, 888 tax deal. Tell them Chip sent you there. Okay. All right. So I've been telling you this, that my wife and I, we have been so good during COVID for a few reasons. I mean, I have asthma, although I'm pretty much asymptomatic. But a week ago Saturday, so a week from this past Saturday, what's today? Thursday. So almost 2 weeks. We went to an outdoor kind of party, but with it was kind of get chilly at night. And so they would drop that plastic around it. Anyway, it turns out my wife got COVID and she's dealing with it. Tested positive again today. We're in the same house. I'm in the front of the house. She's in the back of the house. She wears a mask everywhere she goes. She's had a little bit of that foggy stuff, although that seems to be abating, and her taste and smell are beginning to come back. So knock on wood, but it fascinates me to this day to continue to hear the attacks on Fauci and others. And I've said this, and I've played it before, and I can't play it enough, of the House spokesperson, Karina Jean-Pierre. This is short, just listen.
Dr. Fauci has always led with the science, and our country is stronger and healthier because of his leadership.
And there's no true word spoken. I'm a huge fan, and I've been a fan of Fauci for 30 some years. Joining me right now is epidemiologist and health expert, and as well as a Harvard alum, and I believe that's right, Dr. Deng. Is that right? A Harvard alum? Did you go to Harvard, or you worked there? Right?
Yeah, kind of. It's not the most important thing in life.
Well, I only bring it up because Harvard has an amazing history. I mean, I just found this out recently. It was a professor at Harvard that invented napalm. I mean, so it's got a really interesting history. But no. I think the thing I like about you is that you're about the truth on this, and sometimes the truth is not always helpful for us on the left. It's the truth is the truth, right? I mean, right now where we are with COVID and with these three is the respiratory disease, COVID, and the flu. We find ourselves again at a position where hospitals and in some communities, beds are full again. People don't wear masks. Whenever my wife and I've been wearing masks for 3 years, just because we know that it's still out there in the variants, and we're considerate, right? I mean, we do it to not infect other people, and my wife, I mean, even though it's obvious that I'm probably not going to get it from her now, almost 2 weeks into this, she still wears a mask. So, my son and whoever comes here, and she stays away from people. But not everybody's like that, and especially people in Congress, people like Rand Paul and others who want Fauci in prison. Where are we, and how do you think we got to this point?
Yeah, this is a very good question. God, we're almost approaching year 3 of this pandemic, right? It's, in certain ways, there's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and I actually think we're more like a halftime. We took a licking in the first year. We fought back with vaccines, but now we're kind of stalling in many ways. Um, disinfo is getting worse. Like Twitter just lifted its COVID misinformation enforcement policy. We don't care anymore, says
How
Twitter.
many people? I mean, that can actually kill people.
I know. In certain ways, like it was those kind of things that Apple, sent a shot across Elon Musk's bow that, hey, all this Holocaust denialism, fear, hate speech people that you're like releasing back into the wild. It's like Ghostbusters when they suddenly
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
the jail of all the bad evil spirits. I think, look, we are in this weird world right now where a lot of kids are still vulnerable, a lot of elderly are still vulnerable. We're realizing the vaccine is good against severe disease, but not against infection. And then that allows the virus to keep rolling through the population. We're tired of pandemic restrictions, and people in America especially gotten very tired of anything masks, unfortunately, for the large majority of population, especially on the right. And but this only breeds the virus to keep going. There's more mutant variants now than ever before, and we just need to get unlucky with one of them, and boom, we could have another crisis. Because I don't know if you remember last year, the Omicron, we didn't even know about Omicron like mid-November, and then day after Thanksgiving, it just like hits the world and takes the world by storm. Literally within 2 weeks, right? We go from what the hell is this thing? Oh, everything's great, to oh my god, it's everywhere, and oh my god, by the next month, it's taking over. That could easily happen again because we're seeing lots of variants. Really, a vaccine and previous infection and invasive variants. So where there's a big kind of like reset, and hospitals, pediatric hospitals especially, are really, really full right now. Really full.
Just respiratory virus, right? Yeah.
It is so frustrating right now. So in certain ways, we're in this frustrating world. But I think also that we've gotten complacent. It's like, what's been working so far is working. Like humans have this tendency to be just really complacent. It's working. If it's working, don't try to do anything else. Don't try to like get ahead of it because, it's the saying, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If it's currently seems to be okay by certain standards, which we have a triple demic, pediatric hospital beds, ICUs are completely full for kids. People, it's like out of sight, out of mind. But I actually think we could be at the cusp of something even worse.
And of course, we know that MERS and SARS, if they had the ability to spread like COVID had, there'd be. I mean, was it MERS that had a 70% fatality rate or something?
Well, MERS had like a 30. Like Ebola has like a 50%. Again, these numbers are very approximate.
And smallpox had like a 40%. I mean, really high rates. I mean, if you're talking about
in terms of severe disease and death, yes. Now, SARS-CoV-2 is around like, early pandemic. It was like about 1%.
Ended up being about a third of a percent.
Hospitalization, death is 0.6%. But between two viruses, one that's super deadly but less contagious, one that's more contagious, hyper contagious, but less deadly. Let's just say 10x less deadly, which will kill more people. And what people don't realize, it's the super contagious, less deadly, but super contagious one that will kill more people. And the math around it is just so obvious. exponential cases balloon, that ultimately sends more people to the hospital and die. But it's just people, this Omicron is mild. Remember that nonsense last year?
Yeah.
It got a lot of people killed. The Omicron wave killed and hospitalized a lot of people. And we're not even talking about long COVID right now. It just
My wife got
abysmal.
really sick. I mean, and we never considered, monoclonal antibodies or anything like that, but she's in good health. She's in great shape, but she still got clobbered. I can only imagine if she were 80 and had, diabetes or whatever, and what it does to certain communities. Again, communities that don't have the kind of either don't have health insurance, that's a whole nother trip we can talk about, right?
Yeah, and monoclonals don't even work anymore right now. That's the thing. Like, we've kind of abandoned the monoclonals because the variants have evolved so far. The monoclonals that we designed for the original Wuhan virus, we don't even barely even recognize the new virus, the strains that's out there. And again, you're right. We can't afford it for the most part, and the U.S. government will stop paying for these things. So,
well, let me ask you
even vaccines next year, like testing, we've started handing them out. Paxlovid, like all these things will come to an end, and when they do, it's going to be bad. And I think also the other thing people aren't realizing is we've stopped innovating new vaccines for the most part. There's like the bivalent, but the bivalent is actually not that innovative. It's again, it just slightly reduces your risk of infection. Now, I definitely get it. It definitely improves your risk of lowering your risk of being sent to the hospital. Definitely get it. But it's not game-changing enough. Like, it is just like a small incremental inching against the virus. The virus keeps mutating. We're just like using inching and to barely keep up, right? But if you don't, it's going to get even further ahead. But right now, the issue is, like, for example, China has vaccines that can be inhaled, and the nasal vaccines. But it's even better than nasal because you inhale it down your entire throat. And it's basically these nebulized.
That's a game changer, right? Because people that
the
won't
game
get
changer.
needle.
But guess what? Like, they're already on phase 2 and finishing their big phase 3 trials. They're already rolling it out. The U.S., we are basically still. If this is a space race, okay, let's go back to the space race to the moon. Okay, back in the 60s. If this was a space race, China would be already in low Earth orbit heading for the moon, while we are still on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral without a working rocket yet.
Yeah.
That is how big of a difference right now in terms of next generation of vaccines. Now, we think, oh, great, we already have, the mRNA vaccines. We're the leaders of the world. Other countries already have mRNAs too. But in terms of stopping the infection, like fighting the actual pandemic and getting there to put it to the end, these pan-coronavirus vaccines, these infection prevention vaccines, because it's infection prevention that will ultimately stop the pandemic, not just hospitalization prevention. We are still on the launch pad with, I don't know, do we have a working rocket? I don't know. Well, China's already in space. And
we're talking to Dr. Eric Ding. How do you say your first? I want to get that right because we told me
Feigl-Ding.
Feigl-Ding. All right. Couple things, just so people understand. Vaccines don't keep you from getting the virus. They minimize.
Vaccines reduce your risk. I always want to reduce your risk. Just like,
I mean, you can still inhale the virus, right? But the vaccines are there to help you.
You can still get infected, but it lowers the odds a little bit. It's just like driving.
Kind of just jump in there.
Driving at 50 miles an hour is lower risk than driving 80 miles an hour. But
a vaccine can't protect you from getting COVID. It'll minimize your reaction to it to a point where, I mean, I've had 5 shots and since in the last year and a half, and I don't know. That's why I didn't get it, and nobody really knows why some people don't. I think I read somewhere where 30% of couples, one of the other couples, don't get it when the other does, and we can't understand that yet. But we do know that vaccines work. We do know masks have worked. We've seen people use masks since the Egyptians, to protect them from, contagious diseases or communicable diseases. And so, I mean, you're an epidemiologist and you track this stuff. It's got, I mean, the fear that our complacency combined with, the idiotic politicization of this is setting us up for a wallop. How do we push that narrative forward so people understand that we're still at the precipice of danger and that we caught a break here? Even though 1 million Americans are dead, we caught a big break.
Yeah.
We had mRNA 20 years in the cooker.
Yeah, the vaccine that we have normally, had this happened just like 10 years ago, we would not have had an mRNA vaccine or any vaccine, AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson. We would not have had it within literally under a year, right? Because from January, when we saw the Wuhan explosion happen, to shot vaccine go into shots in arms in December, right? Of that same year, like that obviously was really historic. It was really historic, and I don't want to minimize that, but we have to realize that took a lot of money and lots of scientific innovation and technology that luckily we had. But the problem is, do we still have that? It's like we haven't been back to the moon in like 40 years, right? I think it's 40, 50 years. But it's like we once spent money to go to the moon, but we have not spent money, that much money up until recently, until Artemis, to go back to the moon. And hopefully in a couple of years we'll go back to the moon.
On the other hand, Doc, maybe we should stop going to the moon and take some of those resources to make living on this planet better. I mean, tell me,
Perhaps.
what do we get out of those? That's a whole
believe,
rabbit hole.
The United States has funding for both. We're not a small island nation. We have money for both.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, other island nations, they still develop their own vaccines. Cuba, as poor as it is, has their own vaccine as well. Look, I think the U.S. needs to leapfrog and keep doing the innovations so that we stay ahead of the virus, because we got licked in spring of 2020 really bad in New York City, summer of 2020 really bad, the fall of 2020, the fall and winter of 2020, the vaccine had just started, we got hit really bad. We can get ahead of it again, but right now I'm not seeing it. There's no warp speed funding. Like right now, the Congress in the pandemic budget requests for preparing for the next pandemic has been cut from 88 billion to now literally 10 to 20 billion. I know actually it's less than 10 billion now. So that's the big worry. Like, we have no funding for the next pandemic, and this current pandemic we're still haven't beaten yet. Honestly, people don't understand. Some people think we're already in the final stretches of ending this pandemic. No, we are absolutely not.
No,
I say we're probably around like beginning of the third quarter of fighting to end of this pandemic.
Tell the story
and
of
people
sperm,
don't realize that.
of men's sperm, and some of this new study that came out, a little disturbing.
Yeah, there's a lot of disturbing along COVID studies. I think the sperm study, I don't know if it's permanent. There was like those who had COVID had 50% lower sperm concentration. It's a small study.
Right.
I kind of find it fascinating. But the big things, because I think those numbers can go back up. The big things is the cardiovascular, the strokes, the brain disease, the early dementias, like the fact that COVID potentially makes you immunocompromised, like your immune system is potentially weakened. There's a lot of evidence for that. All these things, that is what's going to kill us. In certain ways, why are there so much, other viruses all of a sudden? It's also possibly one of the working theory is, there's this nonsense of immunity debt. No. Like, we've already been reopened for quite a while, since like spring of 2021, right? Like, this immunity death thing doesn't play anymore. That could have played in the first few months of like dropping masks and reopening everything, but not anymore. That I think what's currently seeing is potentially related to COVID immunocompromising us and making us vulnerable to so many other diseases. And of course, the long COVID, that risk it's obviously highest right after infection, but even after 6 months, a year, it is still there. And the cognitive decline, it is real, it is there. Like this is, there's so many workers who are unable to work because of this. And I can't emphasize enough that I think we're really screwing things up for our next generation.
Well,
kids are being more immunocompromised. It's just horrible all around.
Over the last 2.5 years, I've had, luminaries such as yourself, people that have spent their lives studying this and trying to, make our country safer and the world safer. It's not easy. As a health economist and an epidemiologist, you deal in a lot of vagaries, right? I mean, it's not always crystal clear. And on one hand, you have people like yourself and others pushing for this. Dr. Art Kaplan from the Division of Bioethics is a friend. Dr. Sam Paul in Miami, and yourself and others I've spoken to over the last couple of years. It give me encouragement that we can, find a way to do this through some health policy and political policy. Then on the other hand, there's this. Marjorie Taylor Greene telling people that if your underwear can protect you from a fart, how will a mask protect you from COVID? She's going to be on a judiciary committee or some committee. That's the other side of this equation, is the amount of ignorance that people propagate. Rand Paul, who is, he calls himself a doctor. He's really, just got finished his shift at the Eyeglass Hut. These are people that talk about this, like they have intelligence and have knowledge, but in fact, they're putting people's lives in danger when they tell people to throw away their masks. Masks can also protect you from the flu. I mean, right?
Masks are variant agnostic. They are for all respiratory viruses. They lower the risk. I think Americans are, the key to wearing masks is you don't just wear masks for yourself. You wear it for your friends, neighbors, your community, and people around you do not know, right?
Yeah.
In Asian, like countries like Japan, South Korea, Singapore, there's a lot of willingness to protect your neighbors.
It's courteous.
Now, America is an incredible country. I'm a proud American. But one thing is, America is, as we all know, America is super hyper individualistic, right? Which gives America great advantages in some things. But
I don't know if that's a good thing.
Wearing masks to protect your fellow man, Americans are just not really ingrained for that. And it's very unfortunate that people can't see, hey, maybe protecting people around you, not just like protecting the elderly, but hey, look, maybe protecting the school teachers and the doctors and the nurses and other people who provide us important services in society, paramedics, maybe protecting them and their family could actually benefit me and my family. I think people need to see it that way. But
just be a decent human being. It doesn't have anything to do with your
but Americans, we oftentimes say, "What's in it for me?" Right?
Well, that's
the proposition is, "What's in it for me?" What's in it for me is that, hey, if schools are open, at least make sure that the teachers are healthy, that the kids are healthy, the kids' parents are healthy, and so that they're
have enough testing tools.
All these protect others around you, so that firefighters are healthy and the family members of these people are healthy, so they can actually come to work. All these things, it benefits all of us, right?
Yeah,
I think
right.
It benefits all of us. So this mantra is not. It's like this invisible thing you don't see. People have to see it to believe it. But it's one of those things in which, if you protect all of us, but in this invisible way that you don't see, because you can't see their family members getting sick of a stranger in another home, then we just don't react. It's out of sight, out of mind. It's like you tell people hospital beds are full. They don't believe it until they go to the ER and they try to get a hospital bed. And it's like, oh, shit, I can't get a bed. Oh, someone should have told me it's full. Yeah, we've been telling you it's full, right?
We got to run, Dr.
If you don't see it while going to IHOP, you don't care, and it's out of sight, out of mind.
I appreciate your point of view almost as much as I do your intellect, and your time, of course, is valuable. And thank you for being here. I know that we could talk for hours and hours and hours. I'd love for you to come back again, please, and stay safe out there. Okay. Thank you so much, friend. Again, Dr. Ding. That's where we are. You know, there's a lot going on. I didn't have time to play a lot of the cuts today because we just had such great conversations, and that continues with Mark Thompson and Nikki Maduro, whose show kicks off in just a couple minutes. Hello, my friends. How are you?
Wow, look at this. Hi. Very impressive. It's the gang of three.
Oh, wait, here's our fourth host.
I will eat your ass. I will eat.
This is good. Somebody said, boy, did you know that Chip ran some offensive clip right after you were on the other day? I said, no, I really don't. You did that. John did.
All clips are offensive. All of them.
I think I do 60 minutes of offensive clips every day.
Yeah,
so.
There's a guy in the airport doing a sing Heil or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That guy. Yeah. No, the thing about that is when the cops arrested him, there was actually no knee on his neck. Amazing. White guy on the ground, no knee on his neck.
Yeah. Anyway, I have a whole wall-to-wall offensive show, so it's really no issue on this end as far as I'm concerned. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in China. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the Bay Area. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of high finance. We have law and disorder today. There's, of course, the Rhodes verdict is huge. That's not an easy verdict to get, as you know, Chip, and Nikki, we've talked about this, that, this whole idea of sedition and conspiracy, it's a squishy area. And so it's kind of a big win for the Justice Department. We'll touch on that as well. Sam Bankman-Fried, the kid who got away with it, really, for a long... Boy, I was just saying, I'm so unimpressed with the great minds and big money around Silicon Valley and the VC world. They threw so much money at this kid, and it was all a scam, right?
Oh, yeah.
No. Crypto's not a scam. It's just...
Yes, it is.
No, it's not a scam.
Yes, it is.
I mean, hold on a second, okay? Then money is a scam. Let's say, if you go to the bank to get your money, it ain't there. I hate to break it to you, okay?
Different. Crypto is different than money that's backed by the FDIC and has something behind it. Nobody's backing crypto.
No, but
nobody's doing that.
But let me, girls. Let me just separate you for a second. I think Chip in this case is right that there's an agreement, essentially, about the U.S. dollar. There's an agreement. We've all agreed that this currency is worth something. So similarly, if we agree that Bitcoin or crypto is worth something and we use it to buy things, like you can buy NFTs with it, etc., all of a sudden that currency has worth. It has. Now, what FTX was not that. That was the scam part. That was more. So when I'm talking about a scam, I'm talking about FTX as a scam. I'm not talking about necessarily there may be issues with crypto. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as though crypto itself is a wall-to-wall scam, in my view.
Same hall. We'll put it that way. All right.
Okay. They dance in the same. That's why I like Chip. He says stuff like that. All right.
I don't know. Anyway, I actually watched your entire show yesterday. And,
Mark's awesome. Yeah. But he has to go to it right now, so you have to run along, Mark.
Chip. Yeah, please come again, Chip. Right, please watch again. All right, see you, pal. Bye-bye.
Bye, Mark.
Miss Maduro, your show puts in at 12 o'clock.
Blockchain is not a scam. Crypto is a total scam, and you will not convince me otherwise. I do not.
Blockchain is actually worse than crypto because blockchain sucks energy.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying I support it, but it's an actual real thing. Unlike NFTs and crypto, which is a pyramid scheme. We can go off on this for hours. I'm telling you.
I know we could, and I'd be right. But go ahead. So, what do you got going on, girl?
We're going to update the rail strike fiasco. I mean, and really, this comes down to treating workers like human beings. I can't believe this is over something like paid sick leave. These are
get like
people.
7 days vacation in a year. That's it.
And it's like if they're sick or something happens, how are you supposed to plan your life like that? It's ridiculous.
You got to take your vacation if you're sick. Essentially,
it's stupid. We're going to get into this, and it came out last week or something. This wrongful death lawsuit of the Stanford student who committed suicide, and what her family is suing Stanford now. And while my heart goes out to this family, I'm not quite sure that, at least right now, that there are safeguards in place for what they are saying they wanted Stanford to do. And then Elon Musk is like this close to putting chips in our brain. Not you, Chip, like other kind of chips.
Chip is in
and I don't know if I want Elon Musk.
Chip has no brain, so I have to occupy other brains. So
that's all coming up.
All right. You get out of here, girl. So your show kicks off at 12.
Yes.
Give them 5 there. That's the Nikki Maduro show.
All right. See you later, friend.
Bye. All right. So. Boy, we didn't get to the stuff. I didn't get to my Twitter train wreck stuff today. I will get some of it in tomorrow. some of it just won't go away. Obviously, I wish. We'll talk more tomorrow about some of the regulations with Apple and that. Rick Wilson will join us tomorrow, one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Project. He'll be with me at the top of the show. We'll talk about Trump's with Steve Moskowitz, again, our sponsor, tax attorney. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in Trump's taxes, 6 years of it, that could be used against him. What kind of stuff can you find in there? Also, we'll be joined by Moms Demand Action. It's a group of mothers who have lost children and or are advocates for those mothers who have lost children in gun violence in our American schools. And we'll get to that. Of course, it's a Friday show. We'll talk also about what you should see this weekend that's streaming. I'm watching Tulsa King on Paramount. It's great. We'll get into all that tomorrow. Again, thank you to Malcolm Nance and Dr. Ding for being guests on the show today. It means a lot, and it's good for them to share their time and their expertise, even though sometimes it's some pretty scary stuff. All right, please subscribe here and tell your friends to subscribe. And if you're on Twitter and you subscribe here, I will make sure I follow you back. Honor system, so I don't have to find it. But thank you so much. Again, follow me on Twitter at Chip Franklin. You can email me at chip@chipfranklin.com. Be well. We'll see you on the Friday show.
We shall overcome. Yes, we can. Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
What the f*** is wrong with you?